Welcome to our webinar today, The Ministry Design Process, Core Values Dominance. I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry design coach. In the process of designing your ministry, of being your ministry's architect, we've broken a process for developing your ministry design into 4 categories. Today we're going to deal with core values, the power and importance of them. We call it the dominance in the discovery phase. In going through and discussing core values, we've talked about the definitions and the distinctions of core values. Today we're going to talk about dominance. In the other videos, you'll find the discovery, the discernment, the development, and the delivery of your core values. Resting at the foundation of your ministry design are your core values. Whether you have identified them and developed them and agreed with them and taught your people what they are, you're building your ministry based on what you value as the top priorities for ministry. In doing this, every congregation has a different set of core values, and they develop and deliver them in different ways. So today, we're going to answer the question, why focus on values first? Well, let's just talk about the analogy or metaphor of a ship at a port of call. And every ship at a port of call, and I was reared in Mobile, Alabama, where there is the docks down there. My dad's office was right on the docks, and I grew up going down to his office, and there I'd see ships coming in. Every one of those ships would leave there, and they've got a port of call, a destination. They are headed toward a certain place. God's vision for your ministry is his future destination for where you're going and what's going to happen, what you're going to look like, and how you're going to develop and mature as your ministry ages, and it goes in both size and age. God's got a vision for your ministry, a port of call. Then every ship has a commission to carry out, a direction, and this is your mission. And how you carry out the Great Commission within the posture of the Great Commandment, it differs from church to church. Then you've got a charted course to follow, a set of directives, and this is your ministry plan, your strategic plan. And then you've got a crew assembled, a group of disciples, your personnel, who are going to help you sail your ship, carry your ministry from your port of call, from where you are to your port of call. And then you've got cargo to deliver. You've got a service to render. And then you've got supplies on board. You're organized with policies and procedures and personnel and processes, and you've got programs on board, and they're helping you get from where you are to where God wants you to be in the years to come. So you're on a journey together as a church, as a ministry, as a ship that is going from one port to another. So what's missing in this equation as we look at this analogy or metaphor? What's missing here? And the answer is a cause to fulfill, a driving force. And our core values work to undergird or to support or to give foundation to our calling as a mission. And so your core values are the driving force. They're driving your behavior individually and corporately, whether you identify that and recognize that or not. The things that are most important to us, we look to carry those out. We live out those core values. So why would you focus on values first? Because everything else you're doing is building on them. So let's look at the dominance, and we've got 6 different values that reasons why they are important or powerful or dominating your ministry. The first one is values direct us to our mission. Values are foundational to our ministry design. If you think of a building, it's the floor. If you're building a commercial building, it's probably built on a concrete slab. You've got footings, and they're down into the soil. That's your congregational code. Understanding your code will help you identify your ministries, your congregation's core values, the things that are most important to you. Secondly, our mission draws its direction from our core values. It's built again as a pyramid or as a building, and you're erecting walls and a roof and everything that goes in your building. Your core values are at the foundation of that. Think of it as a wellspring that water is flowing out of it. In this case, your cause for living is growing and flowing, springing forth out of your core values, what you deem as your authentic, actual core values, not your aspired ones, but really what you as a congregation have valued the most. Then values make us distinct. The reason why all of this is important is it's foundational to ministry. It gives us direction with our mission, the directive God's given us, where we're headed, what we're doing, why we exist. And then values make us distinct. You can have the same church in the same denomination, in the same town, and be the same type people and have completely different sets of values. We are as distinct as other people. We're snowflakes. So reaching a certain people in a certain way comes about because every church is unique. We're made up of different people with different shapes. Rick Warren says that shapes is an acrostic that stands for spiritual gift, that's the S, heart, abilities, personality, and experience. So every church is unique. They're located among a different people. So you stop and look at your core values and what you feel is the most important. I'll give you an example. Just here in Greenville, South Carolina, where we live, our church plant, we're very much geared toward the way that we're put together as a congregation to white collar, in particular to C-level executives. And so our certain people that we're best suited to reach are not the homeless or the lower income people, but the higher income people. But you go across the street, so to speak, and you'll find a church that is made up and ready to minister through soup kitchens and ministries to the homeless or lower income people. Then you go across another street and you'll find a church that is dealing with middle income, and that's just one economic social way of putting it. But your values are making you distinct, so it helps you according to what you value and feel you're best suited to, and what's most important. It will help you decide to reach a certain people in a certain way because every church is unique and we're located among a different kind of people. And so as you look at your community, your values give you a unique identity. And so they help define us. So let me ask you, do you understand your congregation's code, culture, and context? That you look at who you are and where God has put you. Do you understand your code, culture, and context? Do you understand who you are and how God has put you together for His ministry? Do you know why God put you where He put you? Because values make us distinct, they give us a unique identity, and they help define us. It tells us who we are. It defines us in several ways. First, as examples, let's look at some Bible examples from the Scriptures. The church at Corinth focused on spiritual gifts. Look at Paul's letter to those at Corinth. At Galatia, you have Mosaic law as being a distinct value. At Ephesus, doctrinal teaching. I mean, the first 3 chapters of Ephesus is full of doctrinal teaching that helps us live out the doctrine through our conduct and duty. So as you look at their values, you can see what they valued by how the church was put together. Neither right or wrong. Everybody has a distinct value system, individually and corporately. Organizations, profit and nonprofit, have core values, and it helps you to identify these because they're directing our mission. Then today with churches, you've got churches that are traditional and contemporary, churches that are blended, churches that are counseling, our family, our teaching, our preaching, our evangelism, our community, our service. In some way, their core values are shaping who they are, giving them a unique identity, and it's shaping and directing their calling, their mission, how they are going to fulfill the Great Commission, how they're going to win souls and make disciples. So a careful examination of your ministry's distinctives where we will reveal your core values. Moving to value dominance number 2, values direct our individual investment in ministry. And there are 2 levels, personal and corporate, and they need to be in agreement. Values align and bring about agreement and congruence, help us vet our involvement in any ministry. So, do you have the same core values as your congregation? Now, if you're a senior pastor or staff member who is listening to this, or you're a ministry leader who's a volunteer in your church, and let me just warn you, you go to do as we're teaching you, and you go through the steps to identify and define your core values, your actual core values. They're authentic, they're true to you. They're not aspired that you wish or think you ought to have this set. This is what you really value as a church. What if you look at your churches and congregations' core values at 3, 4, 5, 6 primary core values, and you don't line up? Well, you need to decide some things. If not, where do you disagree, and at what point can you not invest yourself in your ministry? And so there is the potential for people to leave your ministry when you do this, or for you to leave your ministry when you do this, but you need to do it, because when we're told in Matthew 16 verse 24, if a man would come after me, let him take up his cross, deny himself, and follow me. That means that you do that in your leadership and involvement in your ministry. So vetting your involvement in any ministry that you're going to be engaged in, both the church or individual ministry within that church, or another nonprofit that may be carrying out a spiritual service through some physical service or economic service to a ministry, you teach your people to identify their core values to make certain that what's attracting them to that ministry at its foundation is that you value the same things. Can you see where this would help you? So you want to ask, is there a ministry match? How close are we to matching? And are we close enough in our values to work together? So then let's look at values strengthen the assimilation process. Within your congregation, you want to help your congregation be assimilated into your ministry. In the book, The Other 80%, Warren Bird and his partner do research and then borrow research from 2 other large surveys and research that were done to show that only 20% of the average congregation is involved in ministry, and they're doing 80% or more of the work. You may fully realize this in your own church, but you want to help strengthen the assimilation process of your own ministry, because it will help close the back door where people are leaving your church. So if you help them identify with your ministry and what ministries they are best suited to be involved in, invest themselves in, you can keep people engaged and assimilated into your ministry where they stay for years to serve, and it's fruitful for you and fruitful for them and fruitful for your ministry, and God is honored, and the cause of Christ is furthered through using something as simple as a tool of identifying the core values of your congregation and helping individuals in it to vet their involvement in your ministry. It will help close the back door. It's the first steps in player placement. And so when you're helping your people and you're evaluating them and then enlisting them and engaging them and equipping them in ministry, and you're helping them to be assimilated and involved in investing themselves in ministry, core values is at the foundation of this. So what happens if core values are not identified? Let's say that you don't follow my advice and the advice of others like Aubrey Malphurs, who wrote a great book, Values-Driven Leadership, or his book on advanced strategic planning, or you don't do what Eric Ries says in the book Shape, that takes Rick Warren's Shape acrostic and goes through and helps people do it, or McShane's placeministries.org, which will help you identify your shape, your place in ministry, and help each people in your congregation do that. If you don't use any of these tools, what happens if core values are not identified? We've talked about the value of it and what can happen and to help people find their place in God's economy. But what happens if core values are not identified? If you do not help them identify it, first by the church. Well, you can't help the individuals determine if they belong in your ministry if you haven't identified your church's core values, and then by the individuals. What happens if you do not do it as a church is that you can't help them, but by the individuals. Many individuals, in my years of pastoring and now pastoring pastors, they stumble along from church to church looking for the right fit, and they don't know how to determine if it's a right fit. They maybe just be going on their gut feeling that their intuition says this ought to be a good fit. But if you want to help them sort this out to become a stronger investor of their life and resources, time, talent, and treasure into your ministry, and finding their place in God's economy through your ministry, then you want to help them quit stumbling and find their place. So discovering and developing our corporate core values can empower us to help the individuals discern their personal core values and whether or not they fit into our ministries, whether they fit in our congregation. Because great joy comes when you're sitting beside someone else who has totally bought into the values that you have as a congregation, and they're rowing in the same direction in cadence with the leaders and moving your ministry forward like a rowboat. And they're rowing together and singing together and sweating together and working calluses on their hands together. And they're doing this with the wind blowing in their hair, and they're feeling the cool breeze, and know that you're moving ahead toward fulfilling God's mission, and you're going to reach the vision that God has for your ministry, and you're going to see lives transformed. Well, not only can it serve your potential new members, it can help your current membership as well. You may have found a reason for disgruntled members in your church. They don't share your core values. Thus, you have dueling values. Just as Gary McIntosh talks about churches having double vision, you can have dueling values. And if you've got individuals there who your core values are completely foreign to them, you've got dueling values. You want to address this and help them find a church where they are in alignment with, attunement with. Because remember, it's one thing to give head agreement that, yes, I can agree with those core values. It's another thing altogether to go down 18 inches, so to speak, to their heart, and where they give full commitment. So if they're going to take up their cross, let it be their part in your ministry to carry up as part of taking up their cross and denying themselves and following Christ. Help your people do this. This is a vetting tool. A values match should lead to a ministry match. Help your people invest themselves in the right ministry by testing, learning whether or not they are in alignment, agreement, and congruence in head, heart, and hands with your ministry. Help them find their place in God's economy. Here's value dominance number 3, and that is values motivate people to serve. And you want them to go from sitting on the pew to participating, don't you? And from spectating to serving. One of the first times I went to as an adult, went to a college ball game where I had 81,000 screaming fans sitting in the stands and cheering on two two teams who were playing against each other, and what you had was 80,000 people who needed to go from spectating to serving and from sitting to participating. And I looked down at 120 guys, 22 on the field at a time, who were in desperate need of a rest, while the rest of us needed to get in shape, myself included. But don't you want to move your people from the pew to participation, from spectating in the pew to serving, and from being a consumer to contributing? I want you to catch the following statement. It's one of Marshall's law. It's one of my laws, one of my rules. It takes intentional leadership on the part of the pastors and the leadership team to keep a church from turning inward and becoming consumers instead of being contributors who are focused outward first to reach a lost world with the gospel. We naturally turn to consume and we focus on ourselves. It takes intentional leadership to keep your ministry from turning inward, from being internally focused as opposed to externally focused. So you want to move them from being consumers to contributors, and values can help pave the way for you to do this. Values, identification, and communication provides opportunity for teamwork. It energizes and inspires your congregation. It captures the energy and gifts of your congregation, and it provides a common cause between the church and the members. I forget who came up with this, but I would tell you that you may want to begin changing your vocabulary from the idea of members who have things they're entitled to, just like you're subscribing to our website here, to our services and our training, ministry design training, and you know as a subscriber, as a member, you have certain privileges that we give you. When we use and call our church family, those who are attending our church and they're members, when we call them members and they have a membership, there may be, and you'll have to test this, a mentality that they're entitled to certain things, and they are. They have a vote and a voice. But what if you called them owners, and they're investors in the cause of Christ, and they all own the church together and the cause of Christ together, and they've all bought into it and invested themselves in it? Just a thought here, because you want to take them beyond just being the idea of members, but you want them to be owners and buy into and take ownership of your ministry, do you not? And you want them to have a common cause between your ministry and those who you're making owners. Just a thought. People often need and want something they can commit to, something they feel is worthy of their best effort. They should be willing, even eager, to commit voluntarily and work for that which they deem worthwhile, which is larger than themselves, which creates meaning in their lives. Investing themselves in the cause of Christ, the greatest cause of all. Make it a common cause where they all bind together. They blend together, weave their lives together. And ministry is teamwork. So it is living out Matthew 16, verse 24. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So here's value dominance number 4. Values protect, provide, and preserve. What do they do for this? Your congregational code, back to the soil or the foundation that you're going to build your ministry design in. They also protect, provide, and preserve your effort to lead potential changes. So as you look at this, they're going to preserve your congregational code. We talk about code as being their essence, their personality, their temperament, their DNA, the very core of who they are, their genetic code, the fabric of their congregation. It is your core values flow out of their code. So recommended change can challenge the congregation if it violates two things: their code and the core values that are flowing out of who they are. Churches often have different levels of core values, by the way. When you look at Acts chapter 6, where they had the problem of the murmuring and complaining going on, and the elders there, the apostles, said it's not good that we leave the ministry of prayer and the word to serve tables, but they viewed it as an important issue that they care for these needy people, and so they created a group of deacons, a group of leaders who would care for that. So there were core values, but there were different levels there. You could make that argument. So your effort to lead potential changes can be protected by you identifying and establishing a genuine set of actual core values that will help protect, provide, and preserve your efforts as the leader to make potential changes. And you must understand your congregational code. Go back to the webinars we did on discovering your congregational code and understanding it and putting it into action. You're building the future of your ministry through understanding your code, and it will cause trouble if you don't have it. So, when you talk about leading changes, does the change agree with or contradict your beliefs as a ministry? Your core values can stabilize a ministry in turbulent times. And here's a caution to you. When the rate of change outside of your church, in other words, in your community and county and state and country, when the rate of change outside the church keeps a pace that is exceeding the rate of change inside your church, it can cause the church to go into decline. 85% of the churches in North America, in the United States, are either plateaued, in decline, or dying. Because of this, often there is so much change going around and going on, and we're not adapting and adjusting as good spiritual Marines. And it's causing the church to plateau and then go into decline, and we're closing up to 4,000 churches a year that are dying. Thus, being flexible and able to make changes with your environment is crucial to the future effectiveness of your ministry. So if you want to protect your efforts to lead change, needed change, then you need to have certain things developed. So how do you know what changes to make and what changes not to make? How do you know what is good or not good, or what is good or bad change for your church? And so, for instance, have you identified any sacred cows? Do you know what's essential and non-essential? What are negotiable and non-negotiable things? So here are some keys to leading change. One is to master your congregational code through discovering and understanding it, and then developing it so that everybody knows who you are and is thought through it. Usually a congregational code is discovered with your intuition. This left brain activity, not a right brain where it's logical and reasoning that is used. The next thing, you need to master your theology of church. When you look at Scripture, exactly what is church? Do you know that you may have different views in your congregation, even on your leadership team, as to exactly what is the church and what is your church? Then a theology of culture. There was a book written called The Fine Line. It's written by Carey, and I can't remember his last name at the moment. But in doing so, he talks about where do we draw the line with our connection to the culture that we live in. So we're supposed to be in the culture, but not of the culture. Well, where do we draw the line with that? So we're in the boat that's in the water, but we don't want the water in the boat. Well, where do you draw that? Your theology of culture and your posture you take toward the people outside of Christ, how do you negotiate that? And then a theology of change. And we've done webinars for each one of these that you can go, and it's simply to help you determine what your theology of church, culture, and change is, and to help you understand your congregation's code. So as you look at this, it will help you understand the following things. It will help you understand your direction. It will give you mission clarity, a guiding force. As you know, churches have disagreement as to why the church exists. It also will help you understand your environment. Is your church healthy and fit? By the way, you can be healthy and not fit, and you can be fit and not healthy. There have been guys who have been world-class athletes who were fighting cancer or fighting some other disease that was going on. Phil Mickelson comes to mind as a golfer who was battling some health issues, but he's a world-class golfer. So you can be healthy and fit, or be healthy and not fit, or be fit and not healthy. And there is a difference about it. We talk about it in our webinars. In the midst of a changing culture, are you ready and flexible to make the necessary adjustments and adapt to the environment where God has put you so you can continue to steward your opportunity of ministry? And then it helps you understand your leadership. And be aware of the Peter principle, by the way. Are you able to help your church adapt and adjust to a rapidly changing community while staying true to your core values? One of the reasons why we wanted to do the ministry design training was to help you develop your bandwidth. By bandwidth, I'll explain it this way. If I was going to ask you to juggle tennis balls, okay, not bowling balls, but tennis balls, and you said, well, I can juggle two, so you have the capability to juggle, but only two. If you go to three, you drop them. That's your capacity. In your leadership ability, your bandwidth, we're talking about your capability and your capacity, and you want that to continue developing and growing so that you are able to lead your church from level to level as your church grows and develops. You want to be able to lead it to grow and be able to service it while it is growing. So you want to go from being a doer in a small church where you are fulfilling the work of the ministry to a delegator who is delegating duties to others, to a developer who is helping develop others to delegate and do the work of the ministry, Ephesians 4. And so in leadership, we want you to be aware the Peter principle is where you elevate someone one step beyond their capabilities, and it breaks down and stalls out your church or any particular ministry in your church. So leadership development is paramount to your success in growing your ministry and reaching more people and making disciples and honoring God as you do it. A lot of it is resting on your ability as a leader to go from a doer to a delegator to a developer of people. So here's the thing. Are you able to help your church adapt and adjust to a rapidly changing community while staying true to your core values? Strong beliefs make for strong leaders, and strong leaders make for strong ministries. You'd better go develop your understanding of code, your theology of church, culture, and change, and any other set of theology that you need in order to move your ministry forward, because we shape others more by what we do, which is being driven by our core values, than what we say. So surely all of us understand that preaching something is much easier than practicing what we preach. So as leaders, we've got to show them that we actually have these core values. And how do you do that? Is not by lip service to them, but by living them out. We create credibility as leaders when what we do matches what we say. Consistently live out your personal core values, and it will have an impact on everyone around you. Then core value dominance number 5, and that is values drive our conduct and define our character. They drive our conduct and define our character. Values shape our entire ministry. Our decisions that we make they should not violate our core values, our direction that we go in ministry. You come to a fork in the road and have to make a decision, your core values can give you direction there. The goals that you set, the priorities that you set in ministry, because all of us have limited resources, time, talent, and treasure. We all have limited personnel and opportunities. Our core values can shape our entire priorities, our performance, our problem solving, our conflict resolution. All can be driven in shaping our ministry to help us. So what happens if values are not discovered and developed? Well, what you're going to have is a train wreck. Your decision-making paradigm is out of line with your true values. If you have not discovered and developed them, it is very likely that you're going to make decisions and give your ministry direction and set goals and priorities and perform in contradiction to what really are the values that you and your congregation have as actual priorities in your ministry. When you violate your own values, it leads to not so good results. Your efforts to develop policies, practices, and procedures become very difficult. A church must carry out their ministries in alignment and attunement with your core values. So here's the rule. Core values first, then develop your policies, your practices, and your procedures and your programs, not the other way around. So it's one of the first things we do. Develop and decide what your purpose is, and that should be to honor God, to glorify Him in all that you do. So whatsoever you eat or drink or whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Identify and develop your congregation's code. You know, Peter talks about knowing the sheep put under your charge. Pastors, ministry leaders, know your people. Know them, understand them, study them, and invest the time to develop your skills to do so. And then, as you do this, you want to make certain that you go about then to learn, discover, and develop your core values. So they're not just aspired core values, but the actual core values that you have. Now, value dominance number 6, and we're closing with this, is that core values drive your ministry toward fulfilling your calling. Here's a rule. A church must have and adhere to a sound set of biblical beliefs if it hopes to achieve success. And the reality is, it is the ingrained understanding of a ministry's core values, more than its technical skills, that make it possible for you to succeed. Let that sink in. So if your calling is going to be defined, it is the accomplishment of the ministry's mission and vision without compromising its core values. Let me say that again. It is the accomplishment of your ministry's mission and vision without compromising your core values. So core values are dominant, they're powerful, they're important, and you ought to give time and attention to them because your ministry is being driven toward fulfilling your calling. So why do primary values have such a powerful effect on your ministry performance? Well, your culture is defined by your core values. In other words, contagious values produces contagious faith. When you all value the same thing, you work together. Let me give you, for instance, I coached years ago high school baseball and basketball. I coached soccer and basketball and baseball with my sons growing up as volunteer. In doing this, if I had players who were only worried about their personal stats and not the purpose of the team to win, and that we were know at the end of the game there was going to be a scoreboard. I don't mean to get out of line here, because I taught our guys we're playing to honor God and to have fun. But while we're doing that, we're always competing to win. Paul talks about running the race. Well, when people have the same purpose for living and they value the same things, your values can lead to a contagious faith. If you win people to Christ, it inspires others to do the same. If you value souls, culture is created by the leadership primarily, and your culture is defined, and your calling is defined, and commitment is developed, and the core values are at the base of driving your ministry and your ministers toward fulfilling your calling as a church, and commitment is developed. People become committed to meeting legitimate needs, and they will work harder, longer, to meet those needs when it lines up with their value. If you're wondering why people are apathetic about your ministry and their peripheral and their attendance and involvement and their giving of their time, talent, and treasure, stop and look at your values and their values and see if something needs to be addressed. Then congregations are developed. So callings are defined. Culture is developed, commitment is developed, and congregations are developed. You attract skilled volunteers. Congruent values equals competent laborers with a higher skill level that will join your cause. By the way, one of the challenges I find in coaching pastors and ministering to churches is that pastors struggle with dealing with C-level leaders who are professional executives who are in their workplace. We struggle with blending them and involving and engaging them in ministry. You have to work at learning how to speak their language and understand their thinking as they transition from their business world into your nonprofit church world. Without going into it, that's just a challenge for you, but you're going to attract skilled volunteers. When you develop your congregation, you're going to attract committed volunteers. It's one thing to have skilled, talented volunteers, but when they commit and are in attunement and have followed Matthew 16:24 and are committed followers and devoted followers of Christ. So they're fully devoted and developed followers of Christ. Now you've got something going on here, and now you're developing people, men and women, boys and girls, to be fully devoted and developed followers of Christ. Then you're going to build more resources for ministry. It's going to build more innovation, more creativity to go and minister to people, and it can catapult people, serve as a catalyst or a catapult to sling them as a slingshot out with energy and synergy to go carry out the ministry. They are energetic and enthusiastic, and it's contagious for everyone around them that would have the same core values. Then you see that risk-taking is valued. You've got an environment where permission is granted to try new things, and failure doesn't bring rebuke. Do you have that kind of environment in your church? Or do you try something and your knees are knocking together and your legs are trembling and your hands are shaking, and it keeps you up at night? Because if you try something new and it fails, you know that you're going to be ridiculed. You know that you're going to be bashed for it, criticized for it, and maybe lose some credibility. Well, you want to change that where change and innovation and creativity is valued. Develop your core values. You want to build more resources and give people permission to take risk. So what you recognize and reward, you will repeat in your ministry. You want me to say that again? What you recognize and reward, you will get to repeat and produce in your ministry. Value taking risk. It doesn't mean that that activity or that event, outreach into your community or ministering to new believers in your church, that they're always going to succeed. But you want it to. And so we desire that you would give full attention to understanding the dominance of core values in your ministry, whether you identify it or agree with this statement or not. They are driving your ministry. Identify them and manage and lead to bring about congruence, alignment, agreement with it. And folks, it will strengthen your ministry to do so. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry design coach with Ministry Design Training and Concepts. You can reach me at this email address or either one of these phone numbers. We'll be happy to give you one-on-one coaching. May the Lord bless your efforts to honor him in all that you do as you serve Christ.